Greetings all. How are you? It's Jamaican Tory back with you again, continuing my series of pro monarchy talks. You know, there are a lot of subjects that we have on the agenda that need to be addressed, that need to be discussed as we talk about the continuing efforts by the government to basically upend our constitution. However, today we are going to pivot from the usual talking points and instead just have a little memorial for the fact that today marked exactly 1 year since the unfortunate demise of our former sovereign, the late great Queen Elizabeth II, who, of course, had the distinction of being the longest reigning active monarch of all time. And I use that phrase deliberately because anybody has ever looked on the list of the longest reigning monarchs of all time will see that the only person who is ahead of her is King Louis XIV of France. But of course, a lot of the early part of King Louis' reign, because of course he was very young when he took the throne, about what, 3, 4 years old at the time. So that's the early part of his reign was a regency. So if we were to count the active years of his reign, you'd probably take off like around what, 10, 15 years? Maybe. Not so with Queen Elizabeth, who was an active monarch throughout her reign from first to last, making her the longest reigning monarch of all time. And even if she wasn't, even if we put Louis XIV ahead of her, the fact of the matter is, one distinction no one can take away from Queen Elizabeth is the fact that she was our first real head of state. Prior to her reign, there was no state by the name of Jamaica, because Jamaica was first under colonial rule by the British government, previously the English government, and previous before that the Spanish government. Or was it the Castilians, depending on whether or not we count Spanish unity from when the Capetians took over France, or whether or not we count the Trastamara era as the beginning of Spanish unity. But as a bit of a digression, the point is, during those years, Jamaica was not a state as we know it. It was under the rule of other states. And prior to that, let's be honest, prior to that, Jamaica was a tribal society under the rules of the Taino, which of course was again not really a state as we know it. So as far as statehood in Jamaica is concerned, the first real head of state of this country of ours was Queen Elizabeth II, and she served with distinction for the first 60 years of our independence. And of course, we made a lot of progress during those years. So that's a distinction that no one can take from her, given the distinction that she held in our history of Jamaica as a sovereign country. So, a lot of things happened in this year that passed. The very first year in the reign of our very first king, which of course is King Charles. And of course, we know basically the highlight of the year is, of course, the coronation that took place in May, which, of course, our Prime Minister was gracious enough to skip, even though I am pretty sure that as the Prime Minister of a Commonwealth country, he would have received his invitation and he chose, not to go. But I don't know how I feel about that, because on one hand, he should have gone, given his status as the leader of our government. But on the other hand, it's also kind of a bit hypocritical, given his stance on the monarchy. So maybe staying away was not entirely, a bad idea. It's almost like the Duchess of Sussex, who also decided that, she will skip the coronation, although I'm pretty sure that Prime Minister Holness would not gotten as much boos or jeers as she would have had she showed up there. Anyway, so speaking of the Duchess of Sussex, we have a lot of continuing drama happening within the royal family. And let's be honest, let's be brutally honest. That's actually a very incorrect statement. Let's be honest. Here's the reason why. A lot of the quote-unquote so-called drama that's happening is nothing more than the Duke and Duchess of Sussex stirring up trouble wherever they can just to get media attention. But as for the actual working royals, like the King and Queen, the Prince and Princess of Wales, the Princess Royal, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, royals like those, you don't tend to find a whole lot by way of scandal. And as a matter of fact, there are no scandals, but as far as that's concerned. So what we have is really and truly the Duke and Duchess of Sussex chasing clout for clout's sake. Even the Duke of York, who, as we know, is sort of a pariah in certain circles, have been doing his best to keep himself out of the limelight, which of course I think is best for everyone, for the royal family, for the public, for supporters of the monarchy, for everyone. So, really and truly, as far as that aspect is concerned, there is, not quite as troublesome as it seems to be, apart from the few times when, the Sussexes decide that, they want some clout. For example, in the publication of Spear and all of that. But, moving aside from that, here on the home front, what we know as the major monarchy, royalty related news is the continuing efforts of the government to detach us from the monarchy and proclaim a republic with no doubt a president of their own choosing. I don't know, maybe the Prime Minister has his eyes on the president's job. Maybe he has somebody else he wants to nominate for the job. Who knows? Nobody knows what they're doing. But what I find very interesting is the narrative that is being crafted, which basically tries to make it seem as though the government is doing this now because of the change of guard from Queen Elizabeth to King Charles. And the narrative that's being crafted is the fact that now that Queen Elizabeth is gone, then now is the time to do this. Here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that we know for a fact that that narrative is false. And here's the reason how we know that narrative is false. When the government first announced that they were going to have a referendum on the future of the monarchy, Queen Elizabeth was still alive. King Charles was still the Prince of Wales at the time. This happened in around June or July. It's around sometime closer to the celebration of the Platinum Jubilee. As a matter of fact, it goes back as far back as March, when the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, now Prince and Princess of Wales, visited us. They didn't announce a referendum at the time, but it's from as far back as then. They sort of hinted at it. So for them to now pretend as though it's, only because of the change in the status of the royal family, not change the status, change in the leadership of the royal family that has taken place, we know that that is false. And the thing is, it's not just in Jamaica that false narrative is being crafted. If we look at pro-Republican news sources in other Commonwealth countries, the same narrative is being pushed as well. For example, in Australia, where the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, ever since he first came into office, has been staunchly anti-monarchist. And even when he was running to become the new leader of Australia, we know that he wasn't exactly a fan of the monarchy. Then, of course, in New Zealand, there was former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who, to be honest, I'm a bit confused about her, because on one hand, she states that, she had Republican leanings, but she also says that, she wasn't going to take any active moves against the monarchy. So what her stance is exactly, I don't know, but I do know that she wasn't entirely satisfied with New Zealand's status either. Of course, we know in Australia's case, they ran a referendum in 1999 and they lost that referendum. Hence the reason why Australia is still a monarchy today, and that's the reason why their banner is right behind me. And of course, their banner is right below our own Jamaican banner. And those of you who knows what our coat of arms looks like will recognize our banner right here, beside, of course, that of the United Kingdom, with the banner of Australia below that. But that is all a side note. The point that I'm trying to make is that the enemies of the monarchy have been using the passage of our late Queen as fuel to overthrow the monarchy, and especially King Charles. Now, how that will play out in different Commonwealth countries is going to be dependent on, the setup that each country has. Of course, some countries will have a lot harder time doing it than others. I know, for example, Canada and Australia, because of the federal nature of their governments, it's not going to be very easy to do that. Of course, Canada's government already stated that they have no intention of becoming a republic. And for that, we are eternally grateful, and we really think the rest of Commonwealth countries should follow suit on that. So anyway, before I leave, I just want to do a reading of the Proclamation of Ascension that was read last year following the change of the guard. And this Proclamation of Ascension, and by the way, every single Commonwealth country issued their own Proclamation of Ascension that was unique to their situation and circumstance. I want to read ours, which comes from the King's House website. And it says as follows. Whereas, on the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, by virtue of the Accession Act of the United Kingdom and the Constitution of Jamaica, His Royal Highness Prince Charles Philip Arthur George has succeeded Her Majesty as the constitutional sovereign. Now therefore, I, Patrick Linton Allen, Governor General of Jamaica, do hereby proclaim that Charles III is, by the grace of God, King of Jamaica and of his other realms and territories, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, and wishing His Majesty King Charles III good health and longevity in his reign. Given under my hand and the broad seal of Jamaica at King's House on the 13th day of September in the year for Lord 2022 and the first year of the reign of His Majesty King Charles III, God save the King. And that is where I want to leave you. God save the King.